Welcome to this episode of the Courageous Choice podcast. I'm thrilled today. We're honored by Tim Sackett, who is the CEO of HRU Tech, amongst other things. We've probably heard him on podcasts. You've maybe read his blog. He's known to be a workplace hugger. He was like the first HR influencer I met that actually had a sponsorship. So we can talk about that later. But anyway, I'm really honored that you're here with us, Tim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is amazing. I'm excited that you got it started and are doing the pod.
You know, it's so funny. Yeah, when we first talked about it, I was like, "So what do you do, and how do all these things work together?" And we're doing it. We're figuring it out as we go. So thanks for the inspiration and advice.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I think I had told you was like, if I'm going to do it, I only want to do it about a topic that I actually want to talk about, not something
Yeah.
that I don't look forward to.
Oh yeah. 100%.
And, one of the things that is just for me always inspiring is thinking about courage, right? And so we've talked with different kinds of leaders. We've talked about with entrepreneurs, people have made the leap into, out of corporate into different things. But in corporate and thinking about talent and HR today, from my perspective, it's one of the most exciting times that we actually could be in this profession. And I know you're living at the forefront of it. Um, why don't we jump in? What are some thoughts that you have how that's showing up today?
Yeah. Like the AI thing is totally transforming everything we do. And some people are going to be late adopters. Some are early already and using it. And it's causing a lot of like chaos and craziness. We've seen like from the ATS world, the data is showing that over the last 12 to 18 months, at least 100% increase in applicants year over year. So like you're seeing the double of applicants by most organizations. I talked to like a Fortune 500 TA leader just last week, and she says, and they only hire like white collar, and they're not a big like unicorn brand. So they're not an Uber or Marriott, General Motors. Like it's not a brand everybody would know, and they're averaging 750 applicants per position. And so you go, well, gosh, it speaks to the economy or it speaks to whatever. And it's like the reality is though, she's like, it's the AI, where candidates are applying through AI and these different services and things of that sort. So it's interesting. And then on the other side, we have, the Workday, lawsuit where, someone's claiming that the Workday algorithm didn't pick them. And so they're suing, which is all kind, I mean, you're there in California, so you get to, I mean, this is where it's kind of where it started. And the funny part of that is like Workday didn't even have AI algorithms when this person's claiming that the algorithm didn't choose them from a matching perspective, or the small amount of kind of like matching that they did actually would have benefited him, right? Because it was just about, oh, if you have more experience, you're going to come up higher in the algorithm. There was no one built an algorithm back then which would say, oh, if you have more experience, we actually would have like grade you down. Like that just wasn't even a thought process back then.
No, it's fascinating, right? Because over the last few years, it was all about like, as a company, how can we build AI into our tech stack and how can we be leveraging it and to save time? But quite frankly, now AI is being used on all sides, which almost reduces some of the differentiation from a candidate pool perspective. And I know you think a lot about, okay, so like beyond AI and tech, like what does courage even look like in that talent market today?
It's interesting. I go back to the first 3 weeks of like when I was trained as a recruiter. And to me, the future of recruitment looks much more like a recruiter from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s than it does kind of what we see recruiting today. And it's this, it's the courage to pick up the phone and have a conversation with somebody. And people kind of go, I don't understand, like doesn't take courage or blah, blah, blah. And like, I remember that first like week on the job of being a new recruiter, and like it seemed like the phone weighed, it was like a dumbbell. It was like it weighed 10 pounds, 25 pounds, like because you knew you were going to pick it up and somebody was going to say no. And it was this whole, I mean, for most recruiters, you're getting 99 no's for every yes. And so it's interesting because and so it's one of the things that we got beat out of us as young recruiters. It's like, no, you just have to get on the phone, get on the phone. I literally remember after being 3 weeks and I took all these resumes in to my boss and said, okay, I called everyone and got them all updated. And he literally just turned around and like put him in a trash can and said, okay, now here's the real job. Like it was just literally like, how do we get you to not be scared to pick up a phone and talk to
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
And to me, it's that true courage because if we have AI doing all of the tactical work of recruiting, they're posting jobs, it's out there, sourcing, it's out there screening, it's out there doing this, and it's this ability to have a real job. It's ability for me to call Jamie and say, "Hey, Jamie, I know you're probably not right for this job, but like, give me somebody that you've worked with that is," and doing those kinds of calls, which seem like, oh my gosh, you're back into the early 2000s, 1990s of recruiting when people were asking for referrals and like, wait a minute, why wouldn't you just text or email or that same thing? It's because immediately it's just ignored or said, or they can just say no. But when they're on the phone and they hear you and they hear your pain and you can build this camaraderie with somebody, like that's where the courage, I think, it turns on. And I think we're going to have to see a lot of it, and not just from recruiters, but from a lot of individuals, right? I have, 3 sons who are all Gen Z, and they would rather not eat than have to call a pizza place and put an order in. Like, if they couldn't do it through an app or whatever, they'd be like, "I'll just starve." Like, to call somebody and say, "I want a pepperoni pizza and here's my address," like, they just think, "Oh my gosh, that's so cringe. Like, why would you ever do that?"
My daughter's graduating from University of Oregon this weekend. We're super excited, and I
Go
totally
Ducks.
understand it. Yeah, go Ducks! And she's launching into the whole job search, and even doing what I do. I'm not really into the space. She's environmental design and landscape architecture, and it's fascinating, right? And just
Yeah.
seeing. But you're right. You got to talk to people, and I think even this like. How do we assess talent? You've got the overlay of companies starting to try to hire more for skills, which that is also different, right? And so they're all kind of coming together at the
Jamie,
same
how
time.
long have you hired people? How many years? 20?
I'm going to age myself. Yeah. Oh, more than that.
Let's say
Yeah.
20 plus.
Yeah.
Let's say 20 plus. Did you ever hire somebody that wasn't skilled? Haven't we always hired for skill? I think it's
Well,
the whole skill thing to me is just a joke, right? It's all
yeah,
vapor. I mean, we've
I
always
hired
hired
for
for skill.
attitude, trained for skill. Our
Well,
motto was hire for attitude, train for skill.
yeah.
Right.
But I think we've always looked at somebody and said, well, but even those soft skills they had, the attitude was the skill. And then you go, okay, now I can teach you the
That's right.
technical skill that you need. I think it's a joke when we're going like somehow 8 years ago when all the skill stuff started, like we were going, oh, you know what? We only hire for education and experience. You're like, yeah, like, but that's part of skill. That's part of network. It's part of bringing your whole self. And then somehow we go, and I get why we did it, right? We get it because, hey, there's part of the population couldn't afford or didn't have the luxury of a formal education. And so we said, hey, does it really matter? For so many roles, it doesn't, but we've always hired for skill. And so it's strange to me that we now look at each other and go, oh, you're a big bag of skills. And how can I measure and
Right.
validate
Yeah.
those? You
I only
can't.
want the one skill. You keep those other skills over there. No, clearly that's not what we mean. But I do think it's interesting when we start looking at like what is the work, and like my thing is always like I just want to do good work with good people, right? So we want to hire people
Yeah.
who want to accomplish something big. And I know you're working with a lot of people, whether it's the different technologies you're investing in or the companies that you're helping kind of really reshape things. But getting clear on that work, and from where we sit, the overlay of like how do you use elastic talent as part of your overall talent strategy, and really get smart about that when you plug and play um, specific resources. But to your point, you're never hiring like we just want that one skill file.
It's interesting when you talk about like your daughter coming out of like, like any new grad, high school or college. Right now, we talk about like courage. Like I would expect, and I like just the CEOs that I work with and, the executive teams, like exponentially, they would rather hire somebody that would have this great like conversation or be open. Like I just had this conversation with somebody. I like defined him as a talent curator, right? Which is he sees people in the wild that just have that it, right? And that it is they can engage and they can make people feel welcome. They can make people feel wanted. They can make people feel important. Um, and I always tell people like I never got burned out on recruiting for the simple fact of somewhere along the line I realized when I call somebody and they tell me no, the very next thing after they say no and they hang up the phone is they go and tell somebody, I'm wanted. Somebody called me. I'm being recruited. And it made them feel great, right?
Yeah.
They could have been an idiot to me on the phone. They could have been rude. They could have been nasty. They could have done whatever. Maybe they were friendly and they just said no. Didn't matter. They said no. but then they went out and actually bragged to their work bestie or to their, significant other or to whoever, because we have this superpower as recruiters, right? To make people feel like, oh my gosh, I feel I'm wanted. Somebody wants me. They're wanting to come after me. And it's the greatest feeling in the world, be wanted by somebody else. Um, on a positive side, right? Like it's like not some stalker or something like
No,
that.
no, no. Yeah, but it's also, like, direct contrast to, like, "Oh, I got ghosted by this bot or whatever."
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
recruiter that never called me
Yeah,
back.
for
You know,
sure.
I'm thinking a lot about this kinda early career talent. Obviously, I have my own personal reasons, but I
Yeah.
think, even just in the shifts of how jobs are changing and work is changing in general, have you seen anything cool that companies are doing, for the you said the differentiator is the ability to lean in and have that skill. Like, are you
Yeah.
seeing some cool things?
It's interesting. I see it on both sides. Like one of the things that I'm in love with right now, and I was so in love with it, I invested. But it's this AI screening technology. And the one I'm talking about is a priora. But like what it does is like think about how we apply for jobs right now. 100 people apply to a job. Recruiter goes in. They look at a handful, maybe 10, 15, 20. Cherry pick some, send them a message, do some screening, send 3 or 4 or 5 onto a hiring manager and calls it done. And if you look in that entire process, 80 to 85% of the people didn't even get a sniff. They didn't even get looked at. And ironically, like the best people actually statistically, the best people were probably in that 80 to 85 that never got looked at. Where I think AI screening um, lets 100% of people get in. And then if you layer in some assessment or some job simulation stuff or whatever, you are now are saying, hey, by the way, go back to like, if we go back a decade when DE&I started, it was simply about inclusion. It was like, hey, we need to fish in more pools to get better hiring. That's really what it was about. And there was pools that we weren't fishing in. So they're like, hey, how do we open up this aperture at top of funnel? And so I think I see it now as like going, I want my top of the funnel to be as big as possible. And then I want to layer in AI tools then to get me to the top people of all that's there. And then I can have these great kind of conversations. And I'm starting to see companies that are starting to like, hey, where's the human layer in here that it makes sense for us to actually have a really good conversation, get people excited about us. And it's not just, oh, who's excited about who wants to come work here, who's going to survive our process. Because that's the other scary thing that happens as more and more people apply and you see these higher apply numbers. Companies' knee-jerk reaction is, oh, well, how do we put in speed bumps? How do we make people jump through hoops so we can eliminate that number down to a manageable number? And but and part of us tried to talk ourselves into like, oh, that was because that then what we're left with is the highest quality. You're not. What you're left with is those who are survived, right?
Who are
And so it's
willing to
like,
go through that rigor that may
exactly,
or may
yeah.
not make sense. Yeah.
Which could
Yeah.
be the most desperate. And could they be high quality? For sure they could. But most of the time, what we find is the highest quality people won't jump through your hoops. They don't have to. Somebody else is already talking to them and making it more personable for them. So I go back, like, to me, the question, Jamie, that we have to ask is like, if 75% of this work of recruiting goes away because AI can do it, then what do we do? What do we use this capacity for? And I go back to this kind of human connection. If I say, hey, I want you to come interview, and you walk into my lobby and you talk to the receptionist and they're like, who are you? Who are you here to see? What is this about? Like all of it just feels impersonal. You're just like, oh, I hate recruiting or I hate interviewing. Why are we doing this? But if you show up and there's a sign that says, "Hey, Jamie, welcome. We're excited to see you today," or whatever, and you're a diet Dr. Pepper drinker, and you go into the conference room and there's one there on ice, right, waiting for you. All of a sudden you're like, "Holy crap! Like these people did some research on me and they want me," and the whole interview takes a different turn, and it makes you feel different. And I always go back. We don't have the capacity to do that right now. We don't have the capacity to make people really feel wanted. But we could, and I think that's really exciting. Like, when you talk about, like, the hope of recruiting, I've never been more hopeful because I think we can finally, in my entire career, actually really go after people that we wanna come work for us.
That's really cool. I started my career with Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, and it was all about guest experience, and it was
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
What are their preferences? What do they like? Greeting them by
Yeah.
their name, knowing they're coming, communication on the back end, like, so that when they walk up to the front desk, I'm not like, how can I help you? The, the,
Yeah.
the guy at the front already gave me a heads up, and it can be, welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, or whatever it is. And so really, if we're putting on our lens of wanting to, you could call it branding, you can call it experience, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But the idea is we want cool people who want to do cool things with us, right? And
Yeah.
and so, and good people have choices. So I think it really is about getting clear on what we need and the kind of person that's going to add value to the team, but then also being a place and showing up as an organization that person would want to join in. And I love the idea that really means, it's going to weed out from within the recruiters, the people who one have a kind of a customer service lens or the ability to have those conversations. But also it's like a whole new frontier about re-engineering or redesigning that whole process flow, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I think it's really, I mean, I like when you like the 4-season aspect of, I used to like hire bartenders as recruiters because they could have a conversation. They would dig in right away to find out what people were into. What we haven't done over the last 10 years, because we were all so desperate to have any kind of talent. We didn't go, do you really want to work here with us, with that hiring manager, with this, product, whatever, like what makes you passionate? Like we just stopped digging into the cultural side of this and go like, hey, we really want your skill set here. That's awesome. But we also want to make sure that your crazy matches our crazy, because then we know we're going to love you and you're going to love us. But if like our crazy and your crazy don't mix, it's miserable for you and it'll probably be miserable for us. And like, why are we doing this? And we see this happen so often where it's like, oh, all I want is a software engineer with this skill, this skill, this skill. And then they get there and they're unhappy, you're unhappy, because it's like, oh, well, I didn't really realize that this was your culture, quote unquote, whatever that might be. And it's become like taboo to even talk about culture as well. Back to the DE&I thing. And not that I'm not an advocate for that, I am, but like somehow when we talked about culture over the last 10 years, it became, oh, well, culture is just hiring more of whoever you are. So if you were all white guys, you're just going to be
No,
hiring more
yeah.
white guys. Or if you were all females, it's about hiring more. And you're like, no, that's not what it is. Like I want to open up the aperture. I want as many people in, but also within that segment of the interview process or screening process, I need a certain percentage to opt out. I need a certain percentage to go, oh, that's who you guys are.
That's right.
Cool. Good for you. That's not for me. That's not what I want. I like the color blue and you guys are the color red. Whatever. It doesn't really matter to me.
That's what a strong culture is. It's just so clear that if I do something to increase the guest experience, I'm going to be supported. And if I don't if I just walk by that piece of trash on the floor, I'm probably not a fit, right? Like, it just needs to be so clear that, and if I don't want to pick up the piece of trash or hold the door for someone, then I'm going to opt out, right? It needs to be that clear.
When I worked for in HR at Applebee's, it was interesting because they were a very coach culture. They wanted everybody to have a coach. You had to have a business coach, a life coach, or whatever. And I'm like, I don't need a coach because I saw it as something as, well, what's wrong with me that you think I need a coach? And they were, oh, no, it's not about that. It's about making you better and and helping you, like just be better overall, faster, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm just like, I looked at it as there must be something broken in me if I need somebody to tell me like, so Jim, tell me about your week. And like, what are you working on? And he's like, I don't need that. Like, that's not who I am.
Is that why your LinkedIn says not a life coach?
I get more comments about that than almost anything. People go, I love that. And then the other thing is like, I get every like life coach on LinkedIn reaches out to me to says, hey, I see we're in the same world, or I see we're in the same industry. And I'm like, no, we're not. And apparently you can't read. I don't.
Oh my goodness. That's actually pretty
but no, like, I think it's because, when I tend to help like heads of TA, heads of HR, like I do a lot of diagnostic work, within recruiting. I always feel like I turn into their life coach, because what you find is that the technology is the technology and the process is the process. And, but it's the people that's the biggest issue for most of these companies and most of these organizations around recruiting. It's like, hey, we're not, Tim, if I held them accountable to the funnel or to the metric, they're going to quit. And I just can't have that, because our hair is on fire right now and we're trying to launch this new program and I need to hire 500 people, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, you're being held hostage. Do you understand like what this feels like? And like, I'm just telling you from the outside, you have terrorists in your organization that are holding you hostage, and you should fire them immediately. And you would be shocked at how great you'll feel and how much better everything will work. And that there's so many that don't believe that. And like, so I said, I become this life coach of working through this
Well,
process.
I mean, 2 things, like, talk about courage, right? It's absolutely courageous to just be like, "Yeah, we're not gonna tolerate that." Um, but I've literally in all the years that I've been coaching leaders or helping drive high-performing organizations, I've never had a leader say, "You know, I should have waited longer to make that change," right? Like, never, not single one. It was always like, "I should have changed it
Never.
a long time ago."
Yeah.
So when you have someone that is not aligned or not performing, just be willing to make that shift.
What about
Um
you, Jamie? What do you think? What do you, when we talk about like future of recruitment and the courage thing, I talked about like, hey, this ability to pick up the phone. And for like, for really experienced recruiters, I think that's gonna be hard for some of them. But like when you think of that, like where does the courage come into play there?
So, I mean, I think it's about a total redesign of process, right? And thinking about like, what are we trying to do here? One of the things that I'm finding, you know, you're saying it's usually it starts with a person thing or a leader thing, and we're making assumptions, right? We all have lens. We've had experiences that we've had. We've grown up in whether it's talent or HR or whatever field you're in, and things were real for us. So it's not to invalidate whatever those experiences were, but the assumption that we make that going forward is going to be the same as the past is fundamentally incorrect because of the nature of the variables that are shifting at such a fast pace, right? And so what that causes us to do is have to question assumptions that we don't even know are assumptions, like because they're just truths because of our experience. So for me, it's a really exciting time. But as I think about TA, like how cool would it be to do a working session with you and I or whoever and be like, okay, so what's your what are you trying to do as a company? What's your strategy? What do you have going on now? Like what are the things we want to leverage and what are the things that we just want to throw up in the air and like and let go? Because and you know better on the tech side than I do. I mean, I think there's a lot of solutions. I think you can also over engineer and it can actually get in your way, to your point.
Yeah,
Really.
for sure. I love that and the process side too, because I think so often we get under this concept of, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Or, well, it's not perfect, but it's what we do. And like, oh my gosh, if I would to change this and it got worse, my job's at the line. And so there is a lot of courage around that about saying, hey, big change potentially could cost you your job. And I'm not one to advocate for somebody to go out and make change that could cost their job. If you know, like, hey, here's what we're doing, it's not the greatest, but I'm going to keep my job. Well, hey, you have to do that. That's on you, right? Because I would feel awful, like if you said, oh well, we decided to do this thing because Tim said it was the best, and it didn't work for us, and now I lost my job because we see that, and I'm just like, I'm never an advocate for that. But it's interesting. I love to take the opposite side of something like I was just talking with the head of HR, not about recruiting, but about leadership development. And they were just like, "Oh my gosh, we have these classes and we're doing this." And they're like, "Well," and like, ugh. And it was everything about these leaders, this mid-level leader, right? And everything was happening to these mid-level leaders. And I go, what if what if the employees are the problem? What if they're just not resilient enough? What if our employees are just kind of like being that they're the issue? They're too whiny, or they're just, they're not they're just too soft. And it just kind of stopped, and everyone kind of looked around the room and thought, well, that could be the case. Maybe it's both sides, but why do we always focus on changing the leader to an entire group of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of employees? And what if we made our employees more resilient? Would a lot of these leadership things just go away? Because they wouldn't even look at a leader that made a mistake and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to be complaining. I'm going to be disengaged. I'm gonna be like, no, you're just going to stand up and do the job and get the donuts out on time and just work, right?
No, it's definitely gotten out of whack. Like, I mean, I believe as organizations and HR teams, we have big responsibilities to create a healthy environment where people can bring their best discretionary effort and want to do good work together. But that only works if people show up and want to do good work together, right? Like, there's nothing that the company can do or the leader can do to fix that. And some fundamental skills, like, I a lot of times like receiving feedback. We talk about, oh, leaders need to learn to give feedback. Well, yeah, their teams also need to be able to receive it. I've had leaders say like, I
Yes.
tried, but they're not able to hear it. So the
Yep.
resiliency part is key. I, you know, I just, I think of fear as kind of opposite of courage. And, that fear of losing your job or the fear of making a change with a low performing person or the fear to, kind of co-create or at least question things in process. I think, I just have a belief that decisions made by fear don't lead us really where we want to go. Um, I don't know. Does that resonate for you?
I read something the other day, and I'm not like a big self-help person. It sound this kind of sounds a little self-helpy, right? Which is the person was saying like, choose your discomfort. Is it uncomfortable to pick up the phone and talk to somebody in person? It is. Is it more uncomfortable to be fired and not have a job? Oh, it is, right? And so they're always like, choose your discomfort. Is it uncomfortable to go and get pushed in a workout by a trainer that's going to bust your ass? It is. Is it more uncomfortable to be fat on a couch, can't get up, can't walk, blah, 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 sick, all of those? Yes. And so it's like at some point, all you're doing is weighing what's the discomfort that I'm going to choose? Because everything is discomfort at some
Yeah.
point,
So
right?
the resiliency is learning to get comfortable with discomfort almost.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to ask for some words of advice that maybe you have. Let's start with leaders today, or TA leaders if you want to be specific. But what advice do you have for leaders today?
Um, I think the one thing we fail consistently, and this is from the biggest Fortune 1 all the way down to SMB, like TA, HR leaders, is not having the data, not knowing the capacity of what we can produce in recruiting, so that when the leadership team, when the executive team, the operations team comes in and says, "Hey, we need to do this next quarter or next week or next month or next year," we tend to see this constant churn of TA leaders getting fired because they'll go, "Oh my gosh, we'll work hard. Well, we'll do it. We'll make it happen." And they can't. They don't. They fail almost always. Instead of going, "Hey, by the way, based on all the data that we collect in the funnel, we've reversed engineered the math. And I can tell you right now, the capacity of recruiting in our team is at 95%. I can give you the extra 5%, which might equate to whatever number of positions I can fill. You're asking for 5x that. And so I can tell you right now that we're not going to be able to give you what you're asking for unless I have this resource and this resource and this thing, blah, blah, blah. And then for sure, I feel 100% confident I could actually deliver that number to you." We never have that conversation right now with leaders. And if you sat down with your CEO and your CFO and you had that conversation, they'd be like, "Heck yeah, let's do it." Or, "Holy crap, we had no idea. We maybe can't afford that. Let's slow up this plan," right? Or let's do whatever we have to do differently to make this happen. A classic example, and has nothing to do with resource. It's about, I've been with companies where they'll say, "Hey, Tim, like next quarter, we're being tasked to hire for 250 on top of whatever we have right now." Cool. How many interview slots do you need right now to do the jobs you have? "Ugh, we don't have enough." So how are you then going to do 250 more? Like it's never going to happen. And so it's like it becomes this issue of saying, does the organization realize what it has to then do to get you? So for me, the recruiter capacity piece or the recruiting capacity piece is like the holy grail of measures, because you can actually have this real business conversation that we're just not having now. And I see it. It doesn't matter if it's a Fortune 500 company or all the way down. I see TA leaders losing their jobs every single week because they never had this simple conversation. And then it goes back to, well, why wouldn't they have this conversation? You're like, well, they don't have the data. Why don't they have the data? Because they don't have the courage enough to hold their team accountable to a number and then collect that number and manage the team around that number, which is a sales funnel, basically a recruiting funnel. And once you have that turned on, I can give you your capacity. I can go through, we can do all this.
We can ideate options. Like we can say, this is our capacity. And if we need to add 250, we can partner, we can outsource, we can hire additional recruiters, we can like whatever the things are that how we can get there. Cause that's the other part is like, you can't just be like, can't do it or we have a problem, right? Like.
No, but they always say they do, like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, we'll work 24/7. We'll make it happen." And they don't.
All right, Tim. So I want to know, you've done some really amazing things throughout your career, but you've also transformed quite a bit from where you first met our mutual friend.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe you can share, um, you know, just maybe some points of courage that you think about when you think about your career.
I mean, I passed out for all 3 births of my sons. Is that courageous? I don't know. I mean,
Becoming
literally,
a parent is definitely
people
courageous.
like go, "No," no, like I really like the doctor was like with my wife and they're like, "Is the father okay?" And my wife's like, "He's fine." And I'm just like, "Whoa, I'm out of here."
She's like, it's not always about you.
Um, you know, the very first, I would say, like, large team, leadership role that I had, went through an M&A, piece, which a lot of us have. It's ugly, can get dirty, and I was trying to stand up for my team, and again, in hindsight, it probably wasn't it was courageous, but it wasn't wise because I basically kinda went in with an ultimatum to, like, the new CHRO who had come from the acquiring company and kinda put an ultimatum down and said, like, "Hey, if you can't take care of my team," because they were being underpaid, um, "I'm just gonna have to look for something else," kinda thing, like, feeling like I had something, like I had some leverage, and and it was a she. She's like, "I think you should go look for something else," and, like, literally lost my job, and I was just like, "Whoa, I didn't expect that." So, my team thought I was very courageous for them, right? Um, I didn't think they wanted me to lose my job over it, but it happened, and it was a I always tell people, education at every single point in your life is very expensive. I mean, because we think college and all these people are like, "Oh, I can't afford to go to college," and, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're 20, it doesn't matter if you're 30, 70. When you learning is expensive, and I learned at that point that maybe doing an ultimatum, is not the way to it was an expensive lesson that I learned, and I did learn from it. Um, and people could call it stupid, people can call it courageous. Um, I think having the courage to walk in and stand up for your team is courageous. How I did it, probably not the smartest. I would do it differently now, knowing what I know. But it worked out for me. It was fine.
You know, it's so true. It's like that, like breadcrumb on the journey, and as long as you take the lesson and don't do the same thing again and have to learn it the second time the hard
Yeah.
way,
Yeah,
I think we're good.
exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, and I think a lot about, like, the not doing it, like, who you are, you wouldn't have not done it. Standing up for a team was something you were gonna do. The how you do it can evolve and obviously can
You get better.
become
Yeah.
wiser
Yeah. Yeah.
as you said.
Yeah. Patience. That was another piece, right? If I probably would have went under with that understanding of like, hey, I want to talk to you about something. I want to stand up for my team. I want to like, support my team. But having the patience to understand this is a new evolving process instead of like, gee, no, it has to happen right now kind of thing. Yeah, gosh, that's probably the biggest learning thing in my entire journey as a leader that I had to learn was patience, and it was so hard because I'm a type A person. I wanna move, I wanna go, I wanna break stuff and just move fast, and, like, sometimes, like, you just have to just have patience.
It's not my biggest virtue either. Uh, all right, I'm gonna ask one more question because we talked a lot about trends and all those things, and now I'm talking about you. So since I got you talking about you, I'm gonna ask you one other thing. Um, as you've evolved, right, from internal leader to wearing multiple hats now, can you share how you've kind of up-leveled your own identity and what that process has been for you?
In terms of, like, identity or brand or, like, tell me, like, what are you picking at there?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, like, for many people, and maybe this wasn't true for you, but for many people, part of our identity is the work we do, and often that can be, like, for a long time, I thought of myself, like, single mom, corporate exec, that was, like, my identity, and I'm not a single mom, I'm still a mom, but I'm not a single mom, and I'm not technically a corporate exec,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
evolved, right? And
Yeah.
and also just even how to your point, I don't know that I have a label anymore, but that was an evolution for me. I don't know if that happened for you, and the fact like now you have kind of an umbrella career, if you will.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting for people who maybe, do see themselves kind of through the lens of either their work or profession. And it's an interesting journey. And for someone who's kind of blown up into all these different things, I think it's interesting for people to hear.
I might be the biggest failure of my entire career. Because it's the number one question I get asked all the time, like, especially if I'm out speaking, people are like, "So what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh." It's like it goes right to my heart because I'm like, "Oh, I'm so bad at what I do if people don't even know what I do." Because I do so many things, I'm involved in so many things, in part because I don't say no. I've always told people, like, at the end of the day, I really truly believe that my only job on this planet was to raise 3 great young men. And if I did that, that was successful. And so everything else is just allowing me to do that. And so whether it is running a staffing company or writing a book or speaking or doing a podcast or running a venture fund and doing all this stuff that I get my hands into, I'm curious. And so, I think, I'm helpful without, like, I would help a lot of people behind the scenes without like trying to be boastful about that, because I think it's just not who I am. Like I'm somebody wants help, I'm going to help them. It's the teacher in me. That was like my first career, was I was going to be an educator. Right. So you just try to help, whenever you see that you can. So it's an interesting question, because I think it's probably my biggest failure. I don't think I have an identity, besides being a dad. And then even like when you have teenagers or young 20s and all that, they might even go, well, you're not even that good of a dad. So you're like, oh gosh.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. They come back around. That's what I'm told, at least. I'm
They do
still
come
waiting,
back
but
around. They
around
do
here.
come back around.
Yeah. Well,
Um, yeah.
I heard that living a values-aligned life might be part of your identity, whether that's being a dad, helping others, and being a little impatient. So we can
Yeah.
go with that.
Yeah. I like that. I like to, I think, I like to try a lot of stuff. I like to say yes to a lot of stuff. At the end of the day, I try to say yes way more than I say no. So
Yeah, you're a builder and say yes with abundance, which is exciting.
it's fun.
Thank you so much for joining us, Tim. It's really been an honor. I'm grateful. And thanks for everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.